You're sitting in a meeting. Everything seems normal. Your manager is talking. Your colleagues are nodding. The agenda is moving forward. But something feels wrong. You can't name it. You can't point to it. But somewhere in the back of your mind, a quiet alarm is going off. And then it happens. Your manager mentions a project, your project, and credits someone else. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just casually. Like it was always that person's idea. Nobody flinches. Nobody corrects it. You glance around the room. Blank faces. Professional smiles. And in that moment, you realize something that no job description, no onboarding session, and no performance review ever prepared you for. There is a conversation happening in this room. And it's not the one out loud. Hi, welcome to Delaney versus the system. Here's what most people believe when they start a job. Work hard. Do good work. Stay professional. Earn your place. It sounds reasonable. It sounds fair. And for a long time, maybe years, you build your entire professional identity around that belief. You take on extra responsibilities. You stay late. You produce results. You wait. And then, quietly, someone who works less than you gets promoted. Someone with fewer results, less skill, and somehow, more influence. And you think, maybe I didn't work hard enough. So you work harder. But that's not the problem. That was never the problem. Because you weren't losing a performance competition. You were losing a perception competition. And you didn't even know it was happening. Let me tell you about a specific type of person. They're usually charming. Often well-liked. They say the right things in the right rooms. They never seem to be in conflict, and yet, somehow, conflict always seems to happen around them. They're called office manipulators. And the thing that makes them dangerous isn't aggression. It's subtlety. Here's how they operate. They never attack directly. Direct attacks leave evidence. Direct attacks create witnesses. Direct attacks give you something to defend against. Instead, they plant. A question asked at the right moment: is everything okay with that project? I just want to make sure we're covered. That sounds like concern. It isn't. That's a seed. Dropped into the mind of whoever is listening, your manager, your team lead, the VP sitting at the end of the table. The seed is simple: something might be wrong. And the person responsible might not have it together. You were never accused of anything. But now someone is watching you a little more carefully. And you don't know why. That's move 1. But it gets more sophisticated. Move 2, the reframe. You present an idea in a meeting. It lands well. People engage with it. And then, 3 days later, in a different room you weren't in, your manipulator presents the same idea. Slightly adjusted. With their name on it. When you find out, you feel the instinct to say something. To correct the record. To explain what happened. But here's what the manipulator already knows. Whoever brings an idea to power owns it. Not whoever thought of it first. They understand that perception is established in the rooms you're not in. Move 3, and this one is the most quietly devastating. The alliance. Office manipulators don't just collect power. They collect people. They build relationships with the people who control access to budgets, to information, to leadership visibility. And then, slowly, they use those relationships to filter you out. You stop getting copied on certain emails. You stop being invited to certain conversations. Opportunities you would have been perfect for get filled before you even knew they were open. You didn't get blocked. You got maneuvered around. And by the time you notice the pattern, the decision has already been made. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. Most people's instinct, when they finally identify the manipulator, is to respond. To confront them. To expose them. To go to HR. And that instinct, however justified, is almost always a trap. Because here's what the manipulator has already done that you haven't. They've managed up. While you were focused on doing your work, they were focused on managing how leadership feels about them. Every interaction with a decision maker was intentional. Every hallway conversation was an investment. Every visible moment was curated. They don't just have a good reputation. They have relationships. So when you walk into HR and say, "I think this person is undermining me," you're not just making a complaint. You're entering a credibility contest. And in that contest, relationships beat evidence almost every time. The worst part? The manipulator often doesn't need to defend themselves. Because by that point, they've already built enough goodwill that your complaint sounds like the problem. That's so surprising. They've always seemed so collaborative. You've just handed them the narrative. So what's actually happening in workplaces where this goes on? Here's the hidden rule that nobody puts in any employee handbook. Organizations don't run on performance. They run on trust. Not the trust that comes from results. The trust that comes from relationships and perception. And the manipulator understands this at a level most professionals never reach. They understand that leadership doesn't have time to verify every outcome, evaluate every contribution, or investigate every conflict. What leadership relies on is feeling. How do I feel about this person? Do I feel confident in them? Comfortable with them? Safe around them? The manipulator engineers those feelings, deliberately, consistently, invisibly. And the professional who is simply doing good work is operating on a completely different frequency. One that leadership often can't even hear. This is not a moral statement. This is a structural one. The workplace is a social system first and a performance system second. And once you understand that, truly understand it, everything you've ever found confusing about office politics suddenly makes sense. So how do you defeat someone like this? Not by fighting them. Not by exposing them. Not by becoming them. You defeat them by becoming unseeable. Let me explain. The manipulator's entire strategy depends on controlling your narrative in rooms you're not in. They can only do that if your narrative is uncontrolled, if nobody in leadership has a strong, direct impression of you. The first move is to fix that. Manage up, quietly and consistently. Not with politics. Not with performance theater. With substance. With calm, deliberate visibility. Start communicating your work directly to the people who matter. Short updates. Clear outcomes. No drama. Just evidence. Not to brag. To exist in those rooms. Because the manipulator can only reframe your story if your story hasn't already been told. The second move is counterintuitive. Stop reacting to them in public. Every reaction you show gives them information. Every visible frustration, every defensive moment, every eye roll, that's data they will use to paint you as unstable, difficult, or emotional. In meetings, your face is a document. Read accordingly. When they speak, stay neutral. When they undermine, stay composed. When they claim credit, say nothing in the moment. You're not giving up. You're removing their fuel. The third move is the most powerful. Document everything. Say nothing. Not because you're building a case, though you might be. But because documentation changes how you see clearly. When you write down what happened, who was in the room, what was said, what the effect was, you stop relying on emotion. You start operating on pattern recognition. And patterns, over time, reveal the full architecture of what's being done to you. This is when you shift from being a victim of the manipulation to being a student of it. And that shift is everything. The fourth move. Build your own alliances, in the rooms they're not in. Every relationship the manipulator has built, they built with intention. You need to do the same, but authentically. Find the people in your organization who are respected, who have access, who are trusted. Not to talk about the manipulator. Not to complain. Not to recruit allies against them. but to be known. To be trusted, to exist in the social fabric of the organization independently of anyone's narrative about you. Because when the moment comes, and it always comes, where a decision is being made about your future, you want people in that room who know you. Not what someone said about you. You felt familiar. Watch what happens when you learn to read the room beneath the room. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe.